discussion ahead. Thank you.
So welcome again, fellow panelists, Kendrick, Naveen, and I'm sure Harry would be joining us very, very soon. I wish to also thank ISCM for organizing this very, very timely webinar. We are all formally and informally discussing the issue related to USP of logistics and how the organization can build this USP with end-to-end supply chain capabilities. Uh, the reason why we are so much discussing this is because we are living now in a new normal where disruptions are day-to-day challenge. Now, even in normal times, logistics backbone is what actually carries a supply chain through. But now we are living in abnormal times when logistics is really something which has come as a savior. And why that has happened really is because we are seeing disruptions all around. And I will just recall a few of the recent instances when logistics bottlenecks have created chaos in global supply chains. Suez Canal blockage being just one of the recent example. The blockage at the US West Coast is another big example. You know, we have to realize that these disruptions are now regular, and for one reason or the other, we are feeling disrupted. Uh, because we are discussing this under the shadows of COVID-19, let us also understand the what has really happened. You know, in what way this particular disruption is different from the other disruptions. First of all, this is the one disruption where demand side and supply side both are disrupted. That is number one. Number two is that in the past, the disruption was local and the impact was also more local or at the most regional. But this is one disruption where it is a global disruption and we are all feeling disrupted in different parts of the world. You look at various calamities, various other challenges which global supply chains are facing, and you will see that logistics has become the answer to many, many pain points. Organizations are looking at their logistics infrastructure and the regions where they are working to make sure that they are able to respond to the consumer demand with lot of agility and resilience. So with these remarks, may I request first Kendrick to please introduce himself and spend a few moments reflecting on the agenda.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Kendrick from Teradyne. So in Teradyne, I do the inbound to manufacturing and also the outbound fulfillment for the company. So we are talking about both the in and the out from the manufacturing. So totally agree with Prof, right, that logistics is really like the playmaker. Work with logistics provider like say DGF or Geodis to make things work, make things move around the world in a consistent, reliable manner. But of course, what we see today in COVID-19, it's a lot of volatility, lots of complexity, and uncertainty, and that's why we, as a supply chain, has so much more to do and influence in the industry to make things happen. So I always look at myself as a logistics as an octopus, right? Octopus with a trilemma. Trilemma is just these three priorities. When the three priorities will be cost, will be service level, and quality. So I can be dealing with sales, looking at solutions, rapid solutions with them one day, and the same day I can be looking with my operations and trying to give him the perfect delivery to end customer. or I can be working with my finance to minimize inventory at the same time. So that is the operational aspect. We also have the strategic aspect where, for example, we'll be dealing with the COO to look at where's the next contingency plan. So we have Suto, and now we are looking at alternatives like Malaysia. Yeah, or we could be looking at how the relationships with the internal and external supplier come into play, and how we can help them or how they can help us. And that's where we want to talk about competitive advantage. Right? Competitive advantage is who has the better muscle, who has the greater advantage to influence the whole chain. Whole chain is really an ecosystem. It is not just the first mile to last mile, but the whole chain that reaches the first tier, the second tier, and even the third tier. And so it's like all interconnected. Yeah. So for sure, logistics today have a very big part to play to build the company's competitive advantage. Naveen?
Thank you, Kendrick. You have really given us a flying start with your thoughts on cost, service levels, and quality. Certainly, these are very important issues. May I now invite Naveen to introduce himself and spend a few minutes reflecting on the topic under discussions.
Thank you, Professor, and thank you for the opportunity. Kendrick, nice to know that you're an ex-colleague and probably a current customer. It's always a pleasure to meet customers and colleagues, right? Small world. I think, let me start with that. It is a small world. Supply chain, as big as we think it is actually not. It's a very small world with a bunch of people who are very passionate about this profession. One profession where if you don't have that passion, you cannot be part of it, right? You'll get thrown out or you will run away, because many of you will appreciate that it is considered a thankless job, right? It's almost like the veins in the human body. So nobody talks about the veins. I mean, is there a specialty? I still haven't figured out, right? So it's all over the body, and you cannot say which vein in which part of the body is important, right? It's so important. Otherwise, we cannot exist. So I compare that with the entire organization. So all our customers, supply chain is carrying the blood, right, to make sure that the organization is healthy. So I think a lot of that came to limelight during the pandemic. Not that it didn't exist, prior to that, but it came to a lot more prominence during the pandemic. All of a sudden, people started realizing that, hey, we need food, right? So supply chain need to be active. We need medicines. We need all these essential things. So what is the first thing to be there is the supply chain, right? So the pandemic has, just accelerated the thought process. For the last 25 years, a few topics that I've been involved with customers. One, supply chain visibility. It's as new and as old as I say, right? And supply chain resilience, not a new topic, but now I think it is moving from PowerPoint slides to reality. So several aspects of supply chain are getting accelerated, and it is really taking center stage to make sure the organizations are running smoothly. And last but not least, across the session there was mention about information sharing, control towers, etc., which is part of my job at DHL. So we can clearly see all those aspects coming around. After trying to preach for several years, now customers are engaging with us on those topics. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, Naveen. You have really highlighted a very important issue and that is need for technology adoption. Till very recently, industry was talking about need for technology adoption, digitalization, but there were very few who were proactively pursuing it. But of late, they are seeing that there is just no alternative but to have better visibility, and technology and digitalization is the answer. So thanks a lot for this. May I request Harry Lagad to please introduce himself and talk a few things about his own experiences. Harry, we are unable to hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Perfect.
All right. It's just a lot of rain and thunder outside, so
Sure.
forgive me for that. It's out of my hands. Uh, yeah. So thank you for this panel and for the inviting me to this seminar on supply chain. Very happy to meet Naveen and Kendrick and the rest of the team, and of course yourself, Rajiv. My background has been in business management. I have done various roles in my life from in terms of starting up industries in manufacturing to being an entrepreneur. I've worked with companies such as Kodak, Ingram Micro, um, Nokia, TNT, Toll, Brightstar in the US, and a various number of companies that I get associated with, both on the customer side, on the brand side, as well as on the 3PL side. So I guess at some point of the time, the one gets thrown into what Naveen was saying is the back end of the business, which is in the operations part to run an operations. And so over a period of time, I guess the title of supply chain and logistics got thrown at me, and I have been handling that, and I have been enjoying it. So it's one of those aspects of a career and a business that I think you learn a lot about. So I think I have enjoyed that.
Thank you very much, Harry, for those opening remarks. Talking about myself, I worked for about 20 years in the industry before my academic avatar. And I remember that when I started my career, logistics was largely a backroom function. Nobody really talked about it, hardly anybody knew about it. But recently, I have seen the things changing. What I notice is now even the politicians are talking about logistics and supply chain. And I believe now we have really arrived. Everyone is noticing this function. What has really changed in the recent times are the need for logistics services because of the criticality of this function. And this criticality has emerged because the demand and supply must meet, and people realize that we just cannot wish away this particular function. And therefore, my first question to Harry is you are now witnessing in the post-COVID era lot many changes. So if we will ever look at the history 10 years from now, people will say there was this pre-COVID era and now there was a post-COVID era, and there was a huge transformation between these two eras. So my question to you is that in what way the customer priorities have changed in post-COVID era as far as logistics services are concerned?
Rajiv, thanks. Uh, Let me answer that question from a couple of different perspectives. I think, firstly, from an individual, people that we all are on this planet, having experienced probably one of the longest disruptions of our lives. Uh, we have all learned one lesson in life is that, firstly, try and keep what you have got and live with whatever minimum you can. I think that is the most important lesson that all of us have learned today. Secondly, what used to be what we thought was always good to have, such as traveling, going out for dinners, going out to expensive restaurants, of passing time with our family, friends, everywhere else. I think that has all come to a standstill, and most of us have learned to live without having all those social interactions and all the nice things that we were so used to. For people who have been used to traveling almost 20 days a month, having not to travel for the last 12 months has been a big change. And nothing has changed. Trust me, nothing has changed in terms of life. Yes, you probably miss something, but you don't. The same applies to a business. I think the business has now learned to live with bare minimum, and they have realized that in all the background noise that has been created due to COVID, one of the most important things that has come to the forefront has been that do we actually need many of the things that we thought were for granted? And we start with the basics. Do we need to actually go to offices? If we have to go, to what level do people actually have to go to offices and attend those offices? Do we actually need to produce so much and keep so much when there is no demand? Demand can actually fluctuate quite heavily when there are big disruptions like that. I guess people have learned to live with what is essential and non-essential in business as well as in personal life, and I think that is the way forward. If every business now learns one of the biggest lessons from this, that is define what is an essential part of your business and what you can live with, and will that then allow you to be a successful business or not. If you can come to a proper definition, I think that business is going to be a successful business. That's probably the only lesson that I think I can talk about. Yeah.
Right, Harry. So what you are saying is that either it is whether it is individuals or businesses, prioritization is an absolute must, so that we can cull out the wastage from our system and focus on what is necessary. Yes, absolutely. Thanks for those insights. And Naveen, I would like to know your take on post-COVID priorities from the customers.
Yeah, I think Harry covered the personal situations very well. I think interestingly enough, this is not any different for a person living in India or United States or wherever, right? So thanks for that, Harry. From a customer's perspective, let me give a couple of perspectives, right? So one, in my role as a person who handles several control towers, 4PL operations for customers. Right now, they're screaming in my ear for space. They're just literally screaming. So they want space. They want quick, rates, immediate availability. So this is what is, running in their heads. So they want to run their business. In order for that to happen, they realize that, space is a huge constraint. So they're asking for space. And then, as, most of the providers, have called off their, rates that they have given. At least the majority big ones, they're asking, okay, I want a quick response for rates. So that is what is happening at the moment in order for customers to run operations, right? Long term, in my role in business development, for this 4PL operations, we are seeing a lot of RFQs being floated, right? So which also tells me, I mean, that was a topic that was touched all along the session, even today, right? Control towers, data, sharing of data, that was a very interesting discussion around that. So we are seeing a good pipeline of customers who are interested in those topics. Again, some of these customers have touched on this topic several years back as well, but there was no interest, right? So there is an acceleration in getting that done because that is probably the first step towards digitization, right? So long term, we see this this move towards control tower, data richness, analytics, and digitization happening at an accelerated pace. So I would say, yeah, that is a post-COVID scenario. There is an acceleration, not new topics by any means, but short term, yeah, customers are struggling for very basic things that which normally were not topics, right? discussion. So those are the two things that we are getting from customers, Professor.
So Naveen, when you talked about space constraint, are we talking about shipping space?
Yes, we are talking about international freight, air freight, ocean freight, or even cross-border trucking. All that area where I have a lot of visibility when interacting with customers, right? In the operations. Yes, we are talking about shipping, space constraint, but not necessarily just ocean freight, right? Across all modes.
Okay, thank you for that. Kendrick, you are handling logistics for a product company, and you must be having very different experiences. An organization like you must be looking at logistics as being a source of competitiveness. So how can actually logistics be converted into the source of competitiveness according to you?
Okay, so we just continue from the topic of pre-COVID and post-COVID, right? So pre-COVID, we are comfortable with letting things happen. We know the rates are stable. We have providers like DHL or Geodis to do for us. But now with post-COVID, the power has shifted from, say, the shipper having agreed rates to a very volatile rate. The rates can be 3 times more, and the ocean freight can be super unreliable. They can be delayed. Their berth congestion is far away. The reliability, it's all-time low, say 20%. So with that, everything has sort of shifted from the shipper pre-COVID. Now it's shifted to the asset owners. When I say asset owners, I'm really looking at the shipping lines, the DHL, Express, and the FedEx. And so our mindset will really need to tune. How do we fight, or how do we overcome these challenges? And the challenges could be not just cost, it is also service level and also quality, right? Quality in terms of dependability on the schedules, right? Even now, DHL cannot give you a guaranteed service, or FedEx throw away their money back guarantee. So that's how we have to work on and see as shippers, what do we do? So for example, Teradyne pre-COVID, we used to do a merge in transit. When I say merge in transit, means our system is built at the last minute before it flies to customer site. And the other side of it, we have ocean containers taking their time 8 weeks to reach the site before it gets merged, right? So if we talk about cost, reliability, all went out of whack now with post-COVID-19. So we have to then look again, how do we still continue to bring value to the customer? And it is through being able to switch, say, modes, right? Maybe now air is too expensive, how about we go ocean without impacting quality? Or if ocean is so unreliable, we want to switch back to air. So the business needs to adapt, and we need to communicate with our customers and yet give them the assurance that our products will still reach the docks in good time. So what we have to do is down the line, to the operation and even the planning and the material needs to adjust according and be very reactive and yet preemptive on the customer's needs. So these are the challenges, and where Teradyne Logistics come in is work with the service providers to do just that, provide that flexibility, provide that advantage that I was talking about, right? You can talk about service level advantage, you can talk about cost advantage, the ability to switch to ocean, ocean to air, air to ocean, and yet still give customer the value and perfect installation on site.
Thanks for these insights, Kendrick, and I really appreciate your candid admission that the power balance has shifted in the recent past from the shippers to the asset holders. That is where I would like to bring in Harry. Do you think that there is such a shift? And if yes, then how the asset holders are helping or leveraging the power in their favor to build a long-term sustainable relationships within the supply chains and offering agility and resilience, which is so much required by the shippers.
Thank you, Rajiv and Kendrick. Thanks for those words. But I think the definition of power needs to be defined a bit more, because it's not the power of money. I can tell you that right now. It's probably the power that we are able to provide the service and try and find a solution to the customers who are desperately wanting to get their products shipped out, or warehoused, or transported, etc. Um, there is definitely not an increase in rates from a shipper, from a third-party provider side. I think there is a genuine shortage both on aircrafts as well as on the container side, and that is largely driven by the fact that, as you know, in aircrafts it is very costly to convert an aircraft to a cargo, and no one wants to take that risk, because once you convert it to a cargo, you have to reconvert it back to a passenger aircraft, and then that becomes another bigger challenge. So I guess people are playing it very safe. They have no idea how long this pandemic is going to last. That largely drives the demand, and of course the pricing of air freight. On the shipping side also, it's almost similarly the same. There is a demand, but it is a one-way demand. So containers are going out. How do you get the empties back when there is no secondary demand coming back for the return loads? That is why there is a bigger shortages on the container side, and that then automatically drives up the pricing. Whether the 3PL or the service provider gets an advantage of it, I doubt it, because everything else has, in respect, driven up and has resulted into the cost of services going up everywhere else. So I would rather sum it up to say that I think people have just come to us at the moment because they need it. And I think it is our duty to provide those services to our customers. We cannot deny it. I don't think anyone is taking any undue advantage of the situation at the moment. We are just trying to hold on to whatever assets and whatever services we can provide. And we are trying to do it at the least amount of a loss to us. I think that's basically how I term it today, Kendrick. Sorry, it's not a power situation. I wish it was. Yeah.
No, but let me just add in. Sorry, Prof. Is this right? MERS last year were not doing. I mean, were doing already very well, and they are anticipating that this year it's astronomical, right? It's going to be exponential growth. But if you look at few decades ago, MERS itself did not really make heaps of money. They were surviving, but it's only these 2 years that they got their finance, their structure, their strategy right, and that's where they can really charge more. And that's why I say the power did shift to the asset owners. And of course I understand Geodis maybe not asset owner, unfortunately, then you don't benefit so much.
I guess it's also a two-way street. I think companies should look at their survival and their well-being, as well as their profitability and their people over a longer period of time. If companies were to try and take short-term advantages of any given situation, I think that is unethical, and secondly, not in the best interest of a company being sustainable for a long time. So I guess companies like Geodis, DHL, or any other company for that instance, even Musk, I don't think that we want to try and take advantage. It is just a question that there is a situation where there is a demand to try and fulfill that demand. There is a shortage of service providers or product providers, containers or shipping lines or whatever you want to call them, and we try and acquire them at the best possible rates, right? But I don't think anyone wants to take an advantage. I don't think Musk is seeing a significant rise in their profitability just because of this. I think it is just a question that today their revenues have gone up significantly because of the fact, but I think you will also find that the costs are going up, right? It's not that easy.
So I think more power to the logistics sector. Even if the top lines are going up for companies like Musk, it will translate into more carrying capacities, which would help the shippers in turn in future. And that's a very positive sign. I mean, if someone is gaining today, I am sure that the advantage will pass on to the user sector also in near future. So this is where I want to bring Naveen in, because he was talking about control towers, and would like to know more how these control towers are specifically helping the supply chains to gain more visibility, bring more resilience, or being or having more agile supply chains. Some examples would certainly help us.
Yeah, sure, Professor. Thanks for that. Interesting conversation, Kendrick and Harry. So I have certain views, but for later perhaps. So coming back to the control towers, right? Control towers is obviously not rocket science, right? They have existed for a fairly long time. So if you look at the concept of a control tower, you're looking at standardization. So when you're looking at standardization, it forces organizations to take a look at their processes across the world, right? It is, again, this is done typically when a global ERP rollout is done, right? Similar exercise, but this is specifically on supply chain and logistics, right? So when that happens, there is a lot of standardization that is achieved. And as we all know, standardization, also means a lot of efficiency, right? It brings a lot of, data collection ability from different points within the organization in a very standardized and a structured way. So that is the first step, right? It helps the organization take a look at that. The second thing is the quantity of data and the quality of data and the timeliness of data. I mean, a control tower, I can talk about it for a day, right? Because that is my day job. But in a very simple way, this is about the quantity of data. What is the right amount of data that is, needed for decision making? I think, in the earlier session or the previous one, Subbu from BASF was talking about it. The quantity is important. So is the quality of data. Are we getting the right type of data, right? The quality is it reliable? Is it data worth relying upon? And then the timeliness. I mean, we all know good quality data that comes late is as useless of not having the data, right? So fundamentally, these are the three things that we try to drive with the control tower. And in order to achieve this, we use a combination of processes, right? Standardization of processes, standardization of SOPs, whether it is internal SOPs at the customer or SOPs with the 3PLs, right? Who are a large part of this whole solution, and a centralized TMS and other supporting systems, right? So that's in essence what it is, right? And it has quite honestly, this definition and this approach has not changed for a very long time. What has changed now is until last year, I would say 2019, right? So 2020 doesn't exist. Until 2019, the discussion was everybody was interested in digitization, right? People like myself and other industry colleagues in the on the provider side started asking, how do you plan to do your digitization of supply chain without having the basics in place, right? So those were the conversation, because it was it was almost like a fancy, right, to talk about digitization. But then now what we are seeing is organizations are coming to understand that this idea of control tower, right, in various forms and shapes could be a good starting point on their journey towards digitization, right? So that is where the control towers are starting to play a big role. Finally, last but not least, right, the organization themselves, right, can do this, or they can obviously outsource, right, to a company like DHL or Geodis or anybody. But what is happening is the expertise doesn't exist within the organization. So they are relying on partners to create that entire approach. And also they have also come to the realization that it is not a flip of a switch, right? It takes a lot of effort, a lot of organizational discipline, both on the shipper side as well as the providers, to really make this happen.
Naveen, you have really touched upon a very important issue here, where companies are really struggling to find the right kind of talent. So on one hand, they realize the need for digitization. They also understand that technology adoption is a must. Uh, the talent which was required in logistics sector just 2 years back was very different from what is required today. So I want to bring this question to Kendrick about how do you see, is there a talent gap? And if there is one, what type of credential a future aspirant in logistics industry should have so that he can really deliver value?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, now we're talking about digitization. We're talking about lots of business intelligence and analytics, and so naturally, when we look for people in the logistics or supply chain, we tend to look with a data-centric mindset. That means they could be an IT native. Yeah, they probably start playing iPad when they're 3 years old and toggle with, say, Python today or SQL tomorrow, and these are very comfortable to them. So when I reach out to universities, I teach in the universities, these people is how they can stand up, how they can distinguish themselves with such skills, and how they use such skills to be a value to the logistics or even the supply chain. And yeah, if we can't find, then we rely on Naveen 4PL to provide the analytics for us, so that we can make better decisions. And even Professor John Gaetona said about doing the digital twin. That's really the ideal. It may be too expensive, but that's something to work towards. And if we are able to get our people be so comfortable with data towards this digital twin, we will plan for contingencies. We will be able to plan for such supply chain disruptions and shocks so much better. So to answer your question, it's a cycle. It's a learning cycle. It's not just your head knowledge, but you have to acquire skills along the way. And even now, I'm more than 40 years old, you just still need to upgrade yourself, how to do RPA, for example, right? The robot processing automation and stuff like that. So you just need to expose yourself into the technologies of the generation.
Harry, you have long experience in logistics and other business. And how do you see the things changing as far as manpower requirement is concerned? What type of talent should one look for in order to provide the best logistics services to their customers? I mean, I'm not only looking at the technical abilities, but also, you know, the soft skills, the other part. I mean, what are those attributes which you look for when you are looking for, when you are seeking talent?
Yeah, Rajiv, thanks. I think, if you ask me how it was going back in the 1980s when I was in business and running factories and the type of people that we employed to what it is today, I guess the level and skills that are required in business have changed a lot, right? I mean, basically, we now look for people who are multi-talented rather than just having a single viewpoint of their work. So if we can find people who are multi-talented, multi-skilled, able to work across two or three aspects of business, I think those are the preferred people. Secondly, we want people who are much more open to digitalization. I think that is a required skill set today. Without having that knowledge base, I think people will struggle as we move forward. The third thing that we look for is the ability to understand a customer and to design solutions according to the customer's pain points, not necessarily to what they learn in schools or through seminars or through books, but actually addressing a pain point from a business perspective. In the past, people were not looking at it from a business perspective. They were only looking at it from an engineering perspective. And I think this is the change that has now come in. At the end of the day, one has to look at right from product design all the way to how returns are handled and the role of supply chain in these aspects. And so if you take a myopic view and just focus on one area that you think you know, I think you will always fail. So a person's ability to understand the entire business change is the other thing that we look for.
Absolutely. So logistics is a service sector, and service sector means that you need to have people skills that is an absolute must. As we are closing, as we are inching towards the closure of this session, I want to have a quick thought from Naveen about any particular technology on the horizon which should be very exciting for logistics professionals.
Yeah, so I think I mean I wish I had a silver bullet answer for you, right? There are several technologies, as you know, that are being used. So if we divide supply chain as two parts, right? One is stuff that sits and stuff that moves, right? At a very simple level, right? Where you're storing stuff. Call it warehousing, distribution center, and then stuff that is moving, right? Transportation, within the domestic market or international markets. There is a lot of possibilities happening within stuff that is sitting, because that's a controllable environment, right? From UAVs to robots to all kinds of happening in that space, because again it is fairly controllable. Stuff that is exciting to look forward as we move into the transportation space, where visibility is becoming a lot more critical, right? And all these things are happening. Definitely RPA kind of technologies are playing a huge role. But we also see that blockchain might be back. I'm from a 50-50 to I think moved to 75-25 now, right? I'm seeing some hope after miserably failing in the financial sector. Looks like supply chain might be a bit more feasible there, and also the ability to work from home, right? That space is also changing, even in supply chain, right? So as warehouses get automated and the visibility becomes much more reliable, people don't need to go offices, but then where logistics is a lot of touch and feel, right? It's that kind of a job. So that space in technology is also evolving, is my observations, Professor.
Absolutely. So RPA and ability to work from home, absolutely, and we are seeing them all around us. So I want each one of you to have a quick summary of your thoughts on the topic, so that we can conclude this session, starting with Kendrick.
Right. I just want to say this. Logistics is really a people function, right? And we need to collaborate with service providers to provide that value to our internal or even external customers. So it's really a whole ecosystem that we look at, right? Logistics being able to touch so many pain points, be able to help different departments from a strategic level that I mentioned and the operational level that we mentioned. So it's really about the man, the machine, and the method of how to do it better. So it cannot be without, man cannot do without the machine, and likewise machine cannot do without the man. So it needs to come together to make efficient use of what we have today. Yeah.
So what you're pointing at is a universal balance, where everything is in equilibrium and there are no power struggles, of course. So Harry, so Harry, your views on this?
Yeah, I guess, Professor, I just want to try and sum it up with just a couple of things. One, I think moving forward, a lot of business formats, be it fashion and retail to grocery to even automotive, and the movement of people or goods. I think all of those formats will change. I see retail shrinking quite significantly, even though there is a lot of talk about coped up demand and people wanting to get back to shopping centers, etc. I think people are now going to realize that you really don't need to have such large shopping fronts and formats. A lot of things can be uh, shrunk down, and goods can be delivered at home. A lot of those technologies will come in. I do agree with Naveen that autonomous vehicles and robotic processes, that is the big norm, simply because one has to start moving forward in how do we speed up our processes and take away the variables out of our logistics business. I think human interactions bring in a lot of variations, and I think those are the ones that actually can lead to bottlenecks in the future. In the third part, I guess, is all about data. Data is the king now. Data is going to be the future, whether it is in the blockchain industry or whether it is, trying to ensure that you get visibility across your control tower. Everything requires data, and how you get that data and the points of that data, those are the critical elements today that people are going to explore. So I wouldn't be surprised if you see the emergence of Sigfox, LoRaWAN, and all these other technologies in low power areas come back into place as data becomes critical in our lives. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Harry. Naveen, your thoughts, please.
Yeah, so a couple of things, right? So one, the conversation that Harry and Kendrick had earlier, right? So one of the things that I see happening in that front, right? The shipper, and the supplier, right? The 3PL service provider is, I see the norm today is non-binding agreements, which means that's what Kendrick calls as the power with the shipper, right? Non-binding agreements, which means the 3PLs would not have any control on the volume that was, originally committed to, right? It is not committed. I see that they're changing, which means there will be a balance, right? The 3PLs, will be making commitments as always. This time the shipper will also be, expected to make some commitments so that it becomes balanced. So that's on that. Meanwhile, I think, supply chain and logistics, the big responsibility is sustainability. As an individual, as an organization, and as societies, I think supply chain is at the center of sustainability. I think there is a lot to happen, and a lot can be done, through this function, right? So I believe we will see a lot of that in the next, several years and decades to come. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you all. And I would like everyone to leave on an optimistic note, because I believe that with vaccination and all the efforts of stakeholders around us, the economy is going to bounce back and we are going to get back to normal. And this is where big opportunities are waiting for us around the corner. It is for the logistics industry to really pull their socks up now and to respond to this new opportunity with vigor. So I wish to thank again